Afternoon, Hurricane Irma has absolutely blown up in the far tropical Atlantic with 100-mile-an-hour winds.
It was a tropical storm earlier this morning, but the latest update from the National Hurricane Center now has Irma as a Category 2 hurricane. It is moving off to the west and is forecast to be a major hurricane by tomorrow.
Hurricane Irma. Rapid intensification, Category 2 hurricane. This will be a very dangerous storm and potentially could affect the Caribbean, the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, potentially the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico or Florida. That's why we need to pay attention. So heading into Sunday, Monday, Category 4, there is the potential for this to be a Category 5 hurricane. Nothing in its way in terms of intensification. This is the Euro model, again, one of our reliable forecast models. This is Tuesday, Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Cuba, and then perhaps moving into the Gulf of Mexico. Let's look at the GFS. All right, still a very powerful hurricane, moves towards the west, westward, 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 and then this one sort of takes a bit of a more northerly tour. Let's see if I can get my maps to work. There we go. That is a very dangerous hurricane right there, and it moves up towards the southeast. Okay, this is days ahead. This is next weekend. But what I can tell you is if you live along the East Coast, if you live in Florida, if you live along the Gulf Coast, you need to pay close attention to this storm, as well as the potential storm in the Gulf of Mexico. Also want to make mention, this is Tropical Storm Lydia, could potentially also be a hurricane and affect Cabo in the next couple of days. So busy, so crucial. I don't want to scare. I want people to be aware. We are into peak season. We could potentially have a very dangerous hurricane on our hands in 5 to 7 days that could potentially hit the East Coast, Florida, Gulf Coast, and then we are also watching the potential for a storm this weekend in the Gulf of Mexico that potentially could bring more rainfall to areas affected by Harvey. We will keep you posted. Listen to your local weather services, listen to your local officials, have a preparation plan, know what to do if there's a hurricane near your area.
What we can tell you, there's a great consensus that this is going to be a huge and very strong, extremely dangerous hurricane.
Good Friday afternoon. Here we are on the cusp of a long holiday weekend. We've just entered freshly into September. It's also the month that we reach peak of hurricane season, around September 10th to September 11th. In fact, the month as a whole is really the most active. We see about 34% of all named storms that occur throughout the year happening within the months or within the days of September. Let's talk about one we have out there right now. It's Hurricane Irma. Last time we talked, this was up to a Category 2, higher grade Category 2, Category 3 major hurricane. A little bit of a downgrade today. A little bit misleading, though, as well, because 110-mile-an-hour winds, you need 111 miles an hour to become a Category 3. So minimal downgrade in strength. As we look at the track, no real big changes here as we go through the next 5 days. Also something to note here, because I know you're hearing a lot about different forecast models, different tracks, different areas that might be under the gun as we get into way out 10, 11, 12 days in advance. There's a reason why the Hurricane Center only puts out a track within 5 days, because beyond that, it's up in the air. Models are much less accurate at that point on out, and everything can change that's going on in the atmosphere. So there's a lot of different variables that could change and alter the entire forecast track. So they stop it at around 5 days out, and this goes out to Wednesday of next week at a Category 3, a major hurricane at that point. Let's talk about the evolution over the last 18 hours of this particular system. This is the loop of the satellite imagery. You notice it starts, it's a formidable storm. It has the center of an eye, a visible eye, but then throughout this time frame, it loses the eye. Well, this went through something called an eye wall replacement cycle. And what that happens is there's a ring of thunderstorms around the center of the storm, and eventually they build up so strong and they build inwards. And essentially they cut off the energy flow from the ocean once they do that, and you lose the eye wall. but it does rebuild itself, and you can see here in the last couple of frames, it does reemerge. During that time frame of the eye wall replacement cycle, we typically do see a little bit of an intensity decrease, but it's short term. That's what I think drove the downgrade to a Category 2. Also a few other variables that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But first, a quick update on how far away it is. Obviously closer than it was yesterday. We're about just over 2,400 miles away from the eastern seaboard and, more importantly, Hampton Roads here on the East Coast. But it's moving at around 10, 12 miles per hour. I'm going to switch things up here and show you what it looks like on our satellite imagery, but the filter is switched. Something called the water vapor, and this depicts the difference between dry air and very moist air. You see the center of IRMA here, a lot of moist air around it, but it is starting to pull in and get influenced by a little bit of some dry air. Not exceptionally dry, marginally, and that probably has very little impact on it weakening. It's not expected to stay in that dry air for long, though. In fact, here's one of the forecast models depicting mid-level relative humidity. All right, I know big words, but this is moisture that's up in the atmosphere that'll be conducive for it to grow. Notice a lot of green here. That indicates the moist air, and you see the grays and the browns indicating some drier air. Right now, there is a little bit of dry air getting sucked into the system, but as long as the structure of the storm itself, when you get intense hurricanes like Category 2, Category 3, the structure is pretty sound, so that should not really influence the strength of it. Also working in its favor is these very, very warm sea surface temperatures. You look at them here, well over 80 degrees. In fact, right now, the area where it sits has water temperatures of around 84 degrees. That's about a degree above average for this time of the year. And as it moves along its track, it's gradually building into warmer ocean waters. By the point it gets towards the Leeward Islands, 85, 86 degrees. Now, indiscernible to you and I, a 1 to 2 degree difference in water temperature. We can barely tell. But to a hurricane, that's just that much more available energy to build itself up and gain strength. Also, something working in the favor of IRMA right now is low wind shear. Now, wind shear is winds high up in the clouds, and essential to hurricane growth and sustainability. They need to build up these thunderstorms. They grow very, very high. I'm sure you've seen them outside in the summertime. They get very, very high. Well, when winds are aloft and are strong, it blows the tops right off of those developing thunderstorms. That can really slow down and really hinder any growth to hurricanes. Right now, there's low wind shear. So all the thunderstorms that are developing are building and sustaining themselves, which is why the rapid intensification has occurred, and it's going to likely sustain itself because the forecast is for low wind shear for the next 5 days or so. Now I want to revisit the Hurricane Center forecast and talk about the models that we use to kind of get a forecast track like this. Also, you've noticed probably on this map that you get a cone. This is something we named the cone of uncertainty, and for good reason, because within this are all the different varying models. Where that icon is located is the average of all those models. So pretty much as you get this far out, the cone grows. That means within that entire area, it's possible that that storm could track in that region. Once you get beyond that, it gets even larger. In fact, let's look at two of the long-term models, the GFS and the European. Right now, and really up through the forecast period of the Hurricane Center, really good agreement here. As it goes towards the Leeward Islands, very little difference in where those models are placing the center of IRMA and the intensity. But once we get beyond that, we start to stray a little bit. One model goes a little bit farther to the west, and one model goes a little bit farther to the east. In fact, the latest updates here shows a pretty good consensus between the two, somewhere off the coast of the southeastern United States. Now let's break it down further. Let's talk about the GFS. Within a certain model, you're going to have several runs, sometimes dozens, of that same model, but you tweak one little tiny thing. In some, maybe the strength of the high pressure sitting over the middle parts of the Atlantic, maybe the strength of the trough coming in out of the northwestern part of the United States. All of those, that minor difference can change the overall track. So this, what we're looking at here, is the GFS model and all of the ensembles, all the different runs of that particular model. You notice the difference here. As we get out to Monday, not this coming Monday, the following Monday, September 11th, the difference from where it tracks out here in the middle parts of the Atlantic near Bermuda to the Gulf of Mexico is a 1,300-mile difference. So the margin of error grows exponentially the farther out you go. That's why it's so hard to say, where is this thing going? You can't say nobody knows. It's not known yet. We have to wait till we get closer, till models get a better handle on the atmospheric conditions. I want to talk more about this. We've touched on this the last couple of videos, but all about the strength of the Bermuda or the Azores high that's sitting over the Atlantic, because that is really a determining factor in what's going on here with the track of the storm. If it is weak, it's moving off towards the west, and then it'll take that loop and hook out to sea. We call it a fish storm. It doesn't affect any land masses. But if it's a little bit stronger, it takes it a little bit farther off to the west, and then eventually we'll take that turn maybe a little bit later and put the East Coast in jeopardy there. But if it's even stronger than that, it could push it all the way out into the Gulf of Mexico. And something else to throw in the mix here, this is a little bit of a new development. Some models are indicating a trough, an area of low pressure or cold front diving in from the north and west that could also impact the steering of Irma. A weakness or strength in either this high pressure or that trough can either steer or divert the storm from the eastern seaboard. So just another thing thrown in the mix there that we're going to have to look at over the next 5 days. I want to wrap up now and talk about those I storms. We talked about this yesterday. A lot of you really like that, to learn about the I names. It said, Isaac, Ike, Irene, Isabel, all I names that had a huge impact on the United States. And I looked back since 1950, 36 storms named with an I. 25 of those became hurricanes. 13 of them were major hurricanes. And of those 13, 7 made a U.S. landfall. So there you go. I hope you enjoy your holiday weekend. We'll have another update here on Labor Day itself on Monday. Enjoy.